So do you want me to use my MOT?
All right. Good morning, everyone. Breakfast at the Allison B&B, who is also well, let me just jump right into it. And introductions. Introduce yourself briefly. Who are you?
Hi, I'm just having my breakfast here, so my name is Jermaine Allison. I'm a trained by profession health promotion specialist advisor, and in my retirement role here in Jamaica, I'm trying to be a wellness coach, a health coach, life coach, so culminating most of my skills that I've had over my career into this more mature role as a facilitator of other people's growth.
Okay, thank you very much. And as you know, I am Zena Whitworth, and this is part of my action research project, our final capstone, and I'm doing it on feedback as a coaching practice. So part of the action research is that we had to come up with interview questions. So I decided to interview people that I know are actually doing the work, so just to get some feedback on their perspective. So question number one, what is your role and title?
Well, I have many. My role here is as a hostess in a very small B&B here in Jamaica. I have the role as a mother, and I have been a wife. You know, many roles I fulfilled over the years, but here I guess what I'm trying to be is a hostess that provides a little bit more than just the bed and breakfast. That I try and facilitate growth in the individuals that come here, and that can be anything from spiritual growth. I can teach people how to relax and facilitate a more spiritual awareness and overcoming fears. I think Zaina will attest to that. So I think it's different for everybody that comes, and I try when people come to be open as much as I can be, and we all have our own crosses to bear, and sometimes I'm better at it than others.
Okay, very good. Now, the big question is, do you consider yourself a coach? Would you define yourself as a coach?
Yeah, I am a coach in many respects. My first degree was a non-teaching sports degree, so as a very young person, 18, 19, I did coaching awards, so I became, like a tennis coach, a basketball coach, a netball coach. So in that role, as a sports coach, you are always looking at the individual from a critical analysis perspective, but you're also taking on board where they want to go. So if you're coaching a young person who wants to be the best in the world, then you will have a different agenda for them than coaching somebody who just wants to join a local club and enjoy a sport. So you have to go with where their client wants to go.
Okay, so thank you. Is coaching a part of your role, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It's like integral to who I am. Like I said, from that very early time, I've been trained as a coach, and the health aspect came much later. It was always just about pure sport, physical activity, and then it became more about community development and working with individuals within a community to help communities. And now, like in my later years, it's more about a combination of that. So looking to see where people want to go and helping them get there.
How would you define coaching in the professional sense?
I would see it as it's almost like my image is of a double helix where the client and you have a communication but you're trying to grow, but it's a two-way street. So the person can't grow without your input, but you also can't grow as a coach without understanding them and their input. So I learn every time I coach a different person. You know, I learn something more about myself and my skills, and they hopefully will grow and learn as well.
Which is my next question. Do you believe in two-way communication?
Absolutely, it's essential. It can't be one way. I mean, that didactic way of teaching is the way the European education system has sort of grown, and then measuring. But we now know with like hindsight, if you like, that if the teacher is not imparting in a way that is actually touching that child's spirit, then they don't learn. You know, some children, they hate school because of that environment, but even now I can just remember that immediately the visuals come to my head of those teachers who taught me rather than the teachers who were just there to facilitate an exam. You know, so you remember those personalities, you remember the way that these people talk to you in school, in the classroom, in those situations. So I think it's about how our spirits resonate, and it is a two-way street, always.
Thank you. What is your understanding of feedback?
So feedback is an essential part of coaching. You know, I've written this little booklet which is about feedback. So you say to a person, well, how tall are you? So you measure them.
Keep talking.
You measure their height. And the feedback is, this is how tall you are. You weigh somebody, and then you do the BMI, and that feedback is about, this is who you are. So the feedback is they can see themselves in the context of height, weight, BMI, blood pressure, and that's the feedback. But then what you impart to them is that actually you're now in control of this, so you can redesign your body. You can redefine who you are by how you eat and how you sleep and how you meditate and how you speak to other people, how you interact with the world around you. So, that's the feedback. The feedback is instant from me, from my input, and then instant for that person based on their actions given that information.
Now, do you provide feedback?
Yeah, so in the booklet...
When serving the role as a coach?
Yeah. So in this booklet, there's a last page, which is a summary of advice for health improvement. So this is like the contract. So I've given you all this input. We've talked about all of these things that are part of your body and mind and spirit and your being, and then it's okay. So with this information, how do you want to go forward? So you tell me, what do you want to take? What's the first step? And you take small steps, small achievable steps in that direction, and that's the feedback from the person. Like I can cut out chocolate, or I want to stop smoking, or I'm going to try walking every day. Well, that's their feedback from what they've learned from your input in terms of how they're going to really try and improve their lives. So yeah, that's how it works.
All right. Do you give your clients an opportunity to provide you with feedback? And how?
Yeah, I do, because it's like, how was that for you? And I think that's been the steepest learning curve for me in this last period of my life, certainly coming from a European environment to a Jamaican environment, is that the feedback that I've got, and sometimes I'm prepared to take it on board, sometimes I still think that, my approach is still my approach, but within the context of an ethnicity and a culture, that has been the steepest curve. I mean, when I moved from the southeast of England up to the remote rural highlands of Scotland, that was a steep learning curve in terms of the context and the culture there. And then coming from that remote and rural culture to this very, very small island and black dominated culture is another steep learning curve. So I take feedback and I reflect on my own practice all the time.
Thank you. What are your thoughts of feedback as a practice?
I mean, I think it's essential. Otherwise, you just get more of the same, and you're hoping for a different, different outcomes if you don't take feedback. I had this conversation recently about the education system here in Jamaica, which is like been the same for God knows how long, maybe 60 odd years, and yet modern day, living is so very, very different now than it was 60 years ago. But we're still teaching in the same way. Recently with COVID, now we've taken this sudden shift from classroom teaching into online teaching, and that has been a real steep learning curve, and we've lost a lot of teaching staff within that because they're not prepared to change and grow. But I do think that the education system itself needs to be looked at in the context of what is the outcome you're looking for, how are you going to grow people for that sort of world, because the world is definitely changing and the education system really needs to change.
Thank you. Have you ever been trained to provide feedback as a coaching practice? Have you ever been trained to?
Yeah. As a coach, as a physical coach, you do that the whole time. I can remember experiments in, as a student where you would set certain things up so that the client goes through, wearing a blindfold, getting feedback in terms of, left or right, getting feedback in terms of strength. All of those sorts of things are giving the sensory feedback to the person who's trying to achieve a certain goal. So feedback has always been part of the way that you work. If you're trying in a life coaching situation, if you're trying to take somebody who's in a certain situation and help them realize how they can get out of it, sometimes you just have to understand that you can't take them from A to Z in one step. That coaching environment is okay, let's just empower them, let them feel that they can make changes before they make the big change. And it's interesting, I'm going through this whole thing myself at the moment, so it's never too late to learn, and getting feedback and understanding where you are in time and space is really important.
All right, thank you. You seem to be very knowledgeable on the topic. Do you know any questions? Do you know any resources to help with feedback as a practice? Or can you mention some of the gaps that comes in between coaching and whereas people in positions, do they understand their role as a coach? Or do you feel like coaching is a gifted, or can you learn to be a coach? A lot of questions. Just take one.
Yeah, no, I think that if you look at industry, for example, and management in industry, it lacks feedback. It lacks that whole didactic, growing helix, double helix feedback situation. It's very, very top down, and the army, for example, is another area where you just given orders and you're just supposed to respond. So there are situations on our planet where the feedback is not a good thing. You want somebody to just react in the moment. But I just think that generally within an education setting, if your teacher is not imparting the knowledge in a way that the student can resonate with and understand and truly grow in their knowledge, then that needs to be fed back. So there's 360 reviews is one of the ways that slow, like I'm the teacher, I review you in your situation, how you're learning, how many hours you're putting in, your style of writing, where you're getting your resources from. That can be a feedback. But also the student can then say, yeah, but you didn't give me this and you didn't tell me that, and I think you could have pointed me in that direction there. And so it's a two-way flow. Did you want me to be critically analytical, or did you just want me to regurgitate what you said in class? How are you measuring me? If I'm going off on left field and come up with a completely new concept, are you going to acknowledge that, or are you just going to say, well, you didn't repeat what I said? So I think feedback in that situation is very, very important, but many staff are not even prepared to think about it. They have their end of end of term review, their end of year review, it's based on how many students get so many grades, and they're quite happy with the way they teach, and people regurgitate their lessons and boom, big tip. You know, and some staff are like that.
You're telling the secrets. You're telling the secrets.
But some situations are like that. But, you know, it's not always appropriate.
Well, thank you very much for participating in this action research project. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Plug your business one more time.
Oh yeah, so if you want to come to Allison B&B here in Jamaica, Montego Bay, Jamaica, the B&B is only $50 a night, so it's very cheap, and they do have extras, so you can have the Human MOT, which is a booklet I wrote for either sex, and I can facilitate your sort of life coaching approach, so you can reflect on where you are in time and space. And I can facilitate taking you anywhere on the island, beach, mountain, you name it. So yeah, come to Jamaica, take time out.